Construction of a new physics, from the oscillation of a medium. Initial considerations. Part 1. Principle of causation by vibration, for the four fundamental forces of nature. The lambda-CDM model, which is under which physics is governed at higher scales, it has great limitations and gaps, which prevents it from finding a clear origin to the mechanisms that dynamize physics today. Be able to satisfactorily explain the origin of time and its nature. Achieve unifying a single physics by integrating it with quantum. Or even, explain the origin of matter and dark energy, which together reach 96% of the total matter and energy of the universe. They are a clear example of that. It is proposed to be able to find a causality to the four fundamental forces of nature in a mechanical way, through the oscillation or vibration of a medium. And from there, seek to respond to these gaps, which presents the prevailing model called lambda-CDM. Analogy, relationship of similarity between different things. A. Electromagnetism. Stop elaborating an approximate analogy that allows us to explain the generation of electromagnetism from oscillation. We will perform an analysis of the behavior of matter under the vibrational effects of a medium, at two very different scales. First at quantum level, and then in relativity. We will initially observe the operation of a series of metronomes, in a medium that fluctuates. It is thus intended to associate the behavior and function of each of the mobile arms of these metronomes, with that of the electrons in the atom, identifying them as balance and polarity tools in both cases. With the difference that the balance of the metronomes is carried out in only one dimension, unlike the atom, which does it in 3 dimensions. As you can see, it is an analysis that starts from a purely mechanical process, but quite complex if it is understood that we speak of the indeterminacy posed by quantum physics, within the limits of relativity. But the concept that synthesizes them and gives an idea of their purpose, will be clear later. The disorderly, chaotic, arrhythmic, and independent behavior of each of these arms in the metronome. It tells us about a quantum medium, and it is identified by the null transmission of movement between the arms of said metronomes and the medium in which they rest. This one does not move at all. It doesn't rock, reflecting that there is no absorption or relationship of movement between matter and the environment. This process of communication and information flow, which is carried out through the arms of each of these metronomes, is what is understood as electricity. Alternating current, or AC. It is an oscillating current, produced by a voltage that rises and falls positive and negative, like a sine wave. The slightest rhythmic movement, and coordinated multiple electrons, expresses what is called density of electrical moments, and allows the board to start swinging. Said rhythmic coordination between several atoms is identified with the electrical polarization. This is what makes it possible to move from the quantum to the relative, from the atomic to the molecular. As the hands of these metronomes begin to balance and unify their movements in coordination, a small oscillation begins to appear at the base. What relates the mass oscillation of the rockers, with said means? It is hypothesized that, if these metronomes had wheels, they would begin to join together. generating molecular groupings, making the simile. This oscillation in groups allows a more effective absorption, or in this case, the transmission, of the oscillatory movement, and is evidenced by the same molecular vibration, which accompanies any massification process in the matter. This mechanism of cohesion is what defines the limits of quantum, with relativity. Small temporal space curvatures would begin to form in said elastic medium. This is how the oscillatory movement of this medium confirms the effectiveness of the proposed mechanism. Said atomic distribution is precisely what allows the classification of the multiple known states of matter, gases, liquid, solid, plasma, among some others. Each of them speaks of structures of matter, designed to absorb these oscillations in certain ways. And according to the densities, its expressed temperature. Plus, as parts of a continuous process in the matter, the massification. The smaller the mass, the greater the frequency of an object must be, for the creation of a force field. And vice versa, the greater the mass, the lower the frequency must be, in order to generate a force field. That is precisely what happens with planets, stars, and galaxies. That they don't need to turn on themselves to create a force field around them, unlike atoms and subatomic particles. Fundamental concepts of a complex nature for the same physics can be interpreted much more simply from this oscillatory analogy. And within these, perhaps the most amazing, is that this mechanism could respond to one of the greatest enigmas of physics today: the absence of antimatter in the universe. That obvious asymmetry between matter and antimatter in its cosmos. If we look at the behavior of this last metronome, in adjusting its movement, we can see that it matches the characteristic property of the antimatter, the direction of rotation of the spin, which generates a reverse electric charge. When we look at the difference in electrons and protons, the respective anti-electrons and antiprotons, is their electrical charge. We find that your rotary movements have been reversed, so their magnetic poles have done it too. In this way its electric charge is the opposite of what it should be. Likewise, to find the difference between a neutron and an antineutron, the following is proposed: the direction of the rotation of the particle. For example, if a neutron turns to the right, the antineutron will turn to the left. At the moment this theory is quite solid, and no physicist currently questions it. Paramagnetism is understood as the tendency of free magnetic moments, either in their spin or orbitals, to align parallel to a magnetic field. Said alignment phenomenon is defined as magnetic domains, and it is characterized precisely by that ordering both in the rotation of atoms, their spin bone, and in that of the electrons in their orbits. If these magnetic moments are strongly coupled to each other, that is, their cohesive direction and time, the resulting phenomenon will be called ferromagnetism. The analogy between the two mechanisms is presented coherently. In this way, the mechanics of electromagnetism are not only consistent when propitiated by means that oscillate or fluctuate. If not that additionally, it gives us answers to phenomena such as antimatter, the generation of magnetic domains, when interrelated by a common means, with quantum entanglement even. At the level of relativity, the creation of toroids through cymatics, shows a mechanism that enables the generation of electromagnetism, by vibration at higher scales. In the nuclei of a large number of celestial bodies in the universe, such as stars, planets, satellites, pulsars, supernovae, or even quasars. In these, the characteristic self-induction of the coils or solenoids, propitiate the generation of magnetic fields at multiple scales. Thanks to the toroidal flow of matter within them, it is possible to find an explanation thanks to the cymatics. Since there is no satisfactory justification of a generation mechanism for these flows of matter. B. Force of gravity. Gravity is not understood as a force today. It is explained as a phenomenon of nature, that relates the accumulated matter in the form of mass, and the curvature that occurs in said medium, fruit of the distribution of this same matter. Albert Einstein defines it in the following formula.
The left-hand side lives in the world of geometry, of mathematics. The right-hand side lives in the world of physics, of matter and movement. And so perhaps the most powerful ingredient of the equation is this very symbol equal sign here, these two lines that actually are connecting the two worlds. And it's quite appropriate, there are two lines, because it's two-way traffic. Matter tells space and time to curve. Space and time tells matter to move.
We found that the behavior of matter in cymatics, between a range of specific frequencies, and according to the particles studied, satisfies this description: space tells matter to move. Being able to create in this process the concept of time, and this tells the space, and at the same time, to be curved. We see how gravity with Einstein ceases to be an inherent property of matter and mass, and begins to link with the environment that inhabits it. Debuting quantum qualities, if you think that all matter responds with the same speed to the case. Again, the analogy of both media is satisfactory. There is a mathematical relationship that points in this direction as well: gravitational potential energy, where said energy is negative from its equation. This tells us how the gravitational potential in matter increases as we move further away from the mass. For Bell theory, gravity is understood as the natural response that the matter presents for grouping, as a result of the oscillation of a medium. The concept of time. For physics, the concept of time is perhaps the most disturbing, enigmatic and complex. It is currently understood as an additional dimension to the three-space. Time is unidirectional, flows, and always runs from a past to a future, with a constant present, and deeply related to space. It perfectly describes the behavior of matter, before a medium in vibration, continuous, and constant. The most accurate atomic clock today. It is made from the oscillations of a cesium atom. C. Weak interaction. Weak interaction is defined as a radioactive decay that occurs in the atom at quantum scales. This allows the exchange of fairly massive particles, called boson W and boson Z, promoting what is known as the change of flavor in leptons. It would fulfill this force, the main function of attenuating the Higgs field vibration in the atom, releasing or radiating a sufficient amount of matter in order to maintain stability in the dot. Radiation is understood as the emission of particles. When an atom is destabilized, the balance between proton and neutron is lost, allowing the exit of ionizing particles. If we look at the behavior of this massification, or cumulus of grains of sand, under the effects of vibration, we will see how a radiation phenomenon becomes evident there. It is possible to propose mechanisms that reproduce at higher scales. D. Strong interaction. Starting from the fact that the strong force does not have an exact analytical solution, that is, there is no satisfactory intuitive explanation. With the sole intention of seeking greater symmetry, the Bell theory states that it has this interaction, the particular possibility of associating it with each of the previous three fundamental forces analyzed, but focusing exclusively inside the atomic nucleus. Like gravity, this force confines matter. It coheses and groups it, making it strong nuclear, with particles inside the atom. With the difference, that this force increases, as these particles move away. Its phenomenological conception then, allows us to propose that it starts from a principle similar to that of gravity. By joining and conglomerating matter or particles in the atom. Like gravity, it is the product or the immediate response of the material, because of the oscillation of a medium, but at especially different scales. Quantum chromodynamics, a theory that describes this force. It has a direct relationship with quantum electrodynamics in electromagnetism, where instead of two types of cargo, three different types will be used, in what is called color. Analogy that also links gluons with photons in electromagnetism, like the bosons that carry their respective forces. In the equations of the gluonic field, in asymptotic freedom, this is formed by 8 types of gluons, and each of them by a gluonic field tensor, formally similar to the electromagnetic field tensor. As for the confinement of color, an equation is presented, reminiscent of the Maxwell equations, which define the electromagnetic field, in terms of currents and charges. With a fundamental difference, gluons have a color load, and can interact with each other. In front of the photons in the electromagnetism, they do not interact with each other. To associate the weak interaction with the strong one, it is necessary to look at the behavior of the strong nuclear interaction at the atomic level, in the post-iron elements. All the elements superior in weight to this, present radiation, when exceeding a radius of 2 femtometers. And this is demonstrated by studying the graph of nuclear bond energy. It is noted that the elements are no longer stable outside this circle. Given this particularity, the Bell theory states that the atom is the result of a specific resonance in matter, at these quantum scales. Such a strong nuclear force approach becomes important, if one thinks of the search for supersymmetry, in all the forces of nature. Possible difficulties in establishing the causation by vibration of the strong nuclear interaction. It can be contrasted with the most current of the atomic models. The Schrödinger quantum mechanical model, which explains the atom as standing waves, or excitations of electromagnetic fields. A standing wave is a concept that is closely related to that of resonance, allowing to define the atom as quantized vibrations. Both sound and light are wave-shaped disturbances that propagate from one place to another. Disturbances are normally vibrations of the particles of a material medium. A wave is the propagation in space of a vibratory motion. And while in the light they are the photons, in the sound they are the phonons. These waves transfer energy without the transport of matter. Phenomena such as the Doppler effect or the Cherenkov effect, among some others, allow to connect the behavior of electromagnetic waves, which define light, with the mechanical waves that do it in acoustics. Part 2. Other enigmas. Energy and dark matter. Dark energy is understood as that energy present in space, which produces a negative pressure, which tends to accelerate the expansion of the universe. Also understood as a repulsive gravitational force. A good way to understand this energy is to look at how common sand reacts, or even other elements through cymatics. For Campana theory, cymatics expresses an ideal analogy of the behavior of matter at the greatest scales of the universe. Phenomena such as cosmic filaments, galaxy movements, the behavior of the nebulae, the birth of stars, accretion disks, even the called satellite galaxies. They can be expressed in cymatics. But among them, especially the behavior of dark energy, there, it can be seen that the accumulation of matter occurs because of the valleys of waves, created by the weight of matter. But we also observe the generation of numerous wave crests, which would correspond to the mechanics observed by dark energy in the universe. To explain dark matter, I recommend watching the video, A Mechanical Way to Explain Dark Matter. Quantum. Currently physicists pose the freezing of the Higgs field thanks to no evidence of disturbances or residual waves, as it happens particularly in the other bosonic fields, the photonic, gluonic, W and Z. It is clear that the fact that the field of Higgs does not present these vibrations and residual waves, perhaps is not an indication that this field is conjugated, but that it is also a possible indication that the field of Higgs is the generator of the residual waves in the other bosonic fields. We even have, in addition, the so-called quantum fluctuations. These present among many, three very particular characteristics. 1. It is the only thing that is present in the absolute emptiness. 2. They are the outer limit of black holes, just in the event horizons. 3. Energy conservation seems to be violated for moments. These three characteristics show an amazing capacity. It is then possible to conceive quantum fluctuations, such as possible residual waves of the Higgs field oscillating. And from there, pose them as the direct responsible for compacting all matter, including the powerful black holes. Curved sinks of stabilized matter. Matter that does not oscillate due to its degree of compaction, and at a density that prevents quantum fluctuations, to massive matter at that level. The relative universe as we know it would then be understood as the product of a mechanical oscillation, at the quantum level, thus generating the mass of this matter. A mechanical game of atomic inertia and molecular vibrations, in perfect synchrony to stabilize this oscillation. Molecular vibration, absorbing Higgs oscillation. In the absence of a satisfactory explanation, why molecular vibration occurs, the Bell theory states that this occurs as the first response at a relative level, which allows matter not only to absorb the oscillation of the Higgs field, but in addition to this, group together isolating said oscillation. A perfect example that explains the mechanics of this phenomenon. We find it in the anti-seismic mechanisms, which engineering uses to absorb the intense earthquakes and earth tremors in the great buildings and skyscrapers. The lambda CDM model. Walking on two singularities. The concept of singularity is presented as an exception to the norm. Inequalities in the approach that cannot be explained under the same precepts that make up this theory. The Big Bang. It is possible to explain the Big Bang as a simple quantum phase change, in which matter and the oscillating medium bone the field of Higgs, and both are understood as potential energy surfaces. They come into resonance. They intersect at a conical intersection, which is also known as a level crossing, thus causing an atomic disorder, or even of particles, in matter. Black holes. You can understand black holes under the principles of a swinging medium. as confinements of matter, so densely massive that they completely cancel out the oscillations of that medium. A place where the atomic density is so high that it cancels its molecularization. Even, the need quantum interactions. Part 3. Leading him to artificial intelligence. Researchers at the Institute of Theoretical Physics, of the ETH from Zurich in Switzerland. They achieved through artificial intelligence, called Skynet, to deduce the heliocentrism of the Earth. The theory of the bell poses the information that through the advances that artificial intelligence has developed to date, 16th century. The Bell theory states that due to the advances that artificial intelligence has developed to date, it is possible to be able to contrast the inertial model called lambda CDM, as it can be the fact of being able to deduce the heliocentrism of the Earth here from the information available to date, if confirmed by Nicholas Copernicus, entered the 16th century. Machine learning is often described as a type of artificial intelligence techniques, where computers learn to do something, without being programmed for it. Through deep learning, it is intended to study the Brownian behavior of the particles in a cymatic environment, for the search for patterns that through CNN's technology or convolutional neural networks, allows to relate the vibration of a medium, with the quantum and relative behavior of matter, in nature. From this, the construction of a simulated virtual model of the universe is proposed, with a single free parameter, and three conditioned to each of the three forces of nature, that not only reproduce the behavior of the most massive objects such as black holes, galaxy, and the cosmic web itself. If not, it also incorporates the quantum wave function, mathematical mechanism that defines physics, at these small scales inclusive. Five essential questions to lead to artificial intelligence. Is the inertia behind the Big Bang, or is it the oscillation of a medium, the origin of energy in the cosmos? Is there a causation by vibration, for the four fundamental interactions of nature? Is the molecular vibration the mechanism used by atoms to absorb or dissipate the oscillation of a medium, and thus be able to configure the relative universe? Can pi be associated with a specific frequency in the quantum wave function, to develop a reference system in electromagnetism? Is the Higgs field vibrating?